Well, hospitality is a value at Crossroads, one of the things that we want to be and one of the things we talk about a lot in meetings, board meetings, staff meetings, and all. And I just want to remind you of that because I'm always amazed at how much of a difference a little bit of hospitality can make. Just stopping and saying hi to someone, spending a little bit more time after church or coming a little bit early to talk to people creates an environment among people that really, really draws people to come back. And the more people come back, the more they hear about Jesus. And that's truly what we want to do. Sometimes just hospitality can be the entrance way for a neighbor or a friend or someone you haven't even met yet to meet Jesus. In the last few weeks, I've been writing cards and asking our staff to write cards to people. And it's amazing how just writing a card to someone and thanking them for what they do and noticing something when they aren't even thinking, they're just going through autopilot. Just noticing that something that someone does for the church can really encourage them to keep serving because they're noticed, they're seen, they're appreciated. And so I'd encourage you, maybe even before you leave today, if there's someone who watches or teaches the class that your kid is in, or stays afterwards with your teenager, or is really, really kind at the hospitality bar upstairs where the donuts are, say a kind word to someone about how you appreciate what they make Crossroads to be. You'll be shocked at how much culture that can create around the church. We've been talking in this series that we're going through right now, Follow Me, about the times in which Jesus invites people to follow him or talks about the shape of following him. And today will be no different. We're going to look at a text in John chapter 12 where Jesus talks about what it means when people follow him. And what's interesting about this text is that Jesus kind of says, follow me as a drive-by, as a passerby moment. But what he does in more detail is talk about how he understands his own death, which is now days away. And so it's interesting, I think, for us years later to kind of bypass all of the theology we've heard about what Jesus accomplished on the cross and focus in on what Jesus says and thinks he's going to accomplish when he dies. And so our text today is John chapter 12, verses 20 to 36. And I invite you, if you would, to turn to it in your scriptures or find it on your phone or watch it on the screen above my shoulders. But would you stand with me as we read the word of the Lord today? John chapter 12, verses 20 to 36. Now there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, with a request. Sir, they said, we would like to see Jesus. Philip went to tell Andrew. Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. And Jesus replied, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant will also be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. Now, my soul is troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No. It was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven. I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. The crowd that was there and heard it said it had thundered. Others said an angel had spoken to him. Jesus said, this voice was for your benefit and not mine. Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world will be driven out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. He said this to show the kind of death he was going to die. The crowd spoke up. "We have heard from the law that the Messiah will reign forever. So how can you say the Son of Man will be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man?" Then Jesus told them, "You're going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, before darkness overtakes you. Whoever walks in the dark does not know where they are going. Believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of the light." When he had finished speaking, Jesus left and hid himself from them. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Sir, we would like to see Jesus. This is how the text begins. Sir, we would like to see Jesus. And we're told that it is the Greeks that want to see Jesus. These Greeks are in Jerusalem for a festival. Now, I didn't read too far back here, but this is shortly after Jesus has entered into the city of Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry. Crowds are everywhere welcoming Jesus into the city. Passover is coming. That'll be the next weekend. People are traveling into the city to celebrate the Passover. And what we're told here ambiguously is that there are Greeks. Now, there's a lot of things we don't know about what that means. This could mean Jewish people from Greece. This could mean Gentile people, people who are not Jews, who are complete and utter outsiders. We don't know if they've come for Passover or for Jesus. There's a lot of ambiguity here. But Greeks tells us they're not from here, they've come a ways away, and their goal is to meet and to see Jesus. And they ask one of the most powerful and simple requests in all of the Gospels. We would like to see Jesus. Now, if someone comes to me with this request, I am clearing the deck so that this person can meet Jesus, to learn about Jesus, to hear about Jesus, to spend time with Jesus. But it's worth asking, if this question was on your heart today, what is it that you're hoping to see when you meet Jesus? Lots of people in the Gospels want to see and meet Jesus, and we find all too often, troublingly even, that many people have an agenda when they want to see Jesus. They want Jesus to be the Messiah and the Son of God, right? They want him to be the Messiah and the Son of God and to take on their agenda as such. I think this is a problem we struggle with today as well, is that we want Jesus to be the Son of God in all the ways we want him to be the Son of God. And all too often, when we actually get a seat at the table where Jesus is teaching and speaking, we find out that his message can scandalize me and my point of view, and my desires, and what I long for. And yet, people keep seeking Jesus. So, I think it's important for us to remember when it comes to Jesus, that when we ask this question, can I see Jesus, that we may not get all that we want out of Jesus. And which makes me wonder and think, is there still a mystery to Jesus within my own imagination and theology and understanding? Is there still a possibility that when I meet Jesus, there's still more to knock off? Is there still more to wrestle with? Is there still more to give up so that I can long for more of Jesus? And I think the answer is yes. I think that Jesus keeps working on us and keeps even scandalizing and convicting us. And the moment that we're given here, the same thing seems to happen once again. The Greeks want to see Jesus, and they meet Jesus. And we're not really told what they want out of Jesus, but Jesus' answers to the question already begins to trouble the crowd. Because while they want to meet Jesus, Jesus doesn't want to talk in niceties. He wants to talk about his death. And so he begins to paint a picture with the people and the crowd gathered today about what his death might look like. And so his answers aren't always what we anticipate and expect they're going to be. And while at this moment, while he's come into the city welcomed by a great crowd, we would think that Jesus would be ready to talk about victory. He's been welcomed as a king and the crowd is on his side. You would think if Jesus had a mind like mine, we would keep strategizing to just take over the city. What's next, Jesus? Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's fight. This city is ours. We're going to kick the Romans out. We're going to undo the Pharisees' power. We're going to make all things right. I'd be ready for a victory speech from Jesus, and instead, Jesus starts talking as if his death is imminent. And this is confusing because this is the height of Jesus' popularity. At no point in his 33 years in life will he be more popular than he is at this exact moment, where people from faraway countries are coming into Jerusalem asking if they could see him, when the streets are lined with supporters waving palm branches, welcoming him in as if he is a king. This is the height of his popularity. So why is he talking about his death? If he was anything like me, if Jesus was at all built the way I am, he would be thinking about building a brand right now. He would be starting an Instagram account. He'd be thinking about the filters. He'd be trying to create a logo. He would be building a brand if he were anything at all like me. But once again, sometimes to our disappointment, but ultimately also what we appreciate, I think, is that Jesus is not like we are. Instead, Jesus is talking about his death, and we're invited to see what his death will mean according to his own perspective. This is what Jesus says on the imminent death of Jesus. He says that when a kernel of wheat falls in a field and dies, it becomes more than a single seed. He also says that judgment will come on the world when the Prince of Peace is driven out. And then finally in this text, he says that the Son of Man will be lifted up. The Greek word translated in English is ambiguous. It could mean lifted up, like raised up physically, or exalted, which is a little bit more of a praise language. He's lifted up or exalted so as to draw all people to himself. And so Jesus, at the height of his popularity, seems to be letting the crowd down easily on their way to Friday when he'll be crucified. These three things are in the Gospel of John, Jesus' understanding of why he is going to die. And he uses these metaphors to explain it. You may have heard me talk about metaphors before. I love metaphors, but metaphors always have a problem because they cannot really perfectly explain everything that's going to happen. They have limitations in and of themselves. But what we do understand is this idea that a kernel dies, is buried in a garden, and that's how trees and plants and fruits bear and grow. We understand how things need to die and be buried in order to bring life. And so, having read, knowing that Jesus would be crucified and resurrected, we can see that Jesus was like a kernel placed in the ground, dead, and 3 days later he comes to life. And what he's saying is, my death will multiply my ministry. And I think all of us here today are proof of that Jesus was buried and resurrected, and 2,000 years later, the gospel of Jesus carries on in strength and power. And here we are. Jesus' sacrificial death was that life and the church and the ministry and the salvation of Jesus might multiply. He also says his death will be a judgment on a sinful world, because a Prince of Peace should not be killed. A Prince of Peace should create peace within people. And yet, peace is so offensive that it needs to be driven out by a sinful world. It will be the judgment of the world that they could not live with the Prince of Peace. And then finally, Jesus says the Son of Man will be lifted up as in order to draw people to himself. It's as if it's a magnetic healing salvation, that when we see the sacrifice that Jesus will make, we're drawn to it. But this Jesus talking about his death isn't all that's bizarre about this text. The beginning and the end are also bizarre. The beginning starts with, we would like to see Jesus. This seems like this is going to be good news of a text. But it ends after Jesus talks with them. He says he hides. He goes and hides. And so starting with people lining up to want to see him, our text ends with Jesus saying, okay, I got to get out of here because this is getting out of control. I need to go hide. Well, shouldn't Jesus be excited that people are wanting to hear him, to speak to him, to get to know the Messiah? So why is he hiding here? This is a strange turn of events as well. And it seems as if underneath it all, Jesus knows that his day and his hour for death is on Friday. Today is probably Monday when this is happening. And he knows he needs to get there, but he knows that within the crowd of people coming to see him are those who want to sabotage him as well. Sabotage. Let's talk about that for a second. I heard a definition of sabotage that I love. This is it. When people want the status quo more than they want transformation. When people want the status quo more than they want transformation. Now, listen, we all know this person, and if we're honest, we've all been this person before. Have you been invited to a work meeting before where you know you are in a toxic environment at work? And you're told what the new plan is to address the toxic environment, and you think to yourself, that's never going to work. I'm not going to change. I don't want to do that. We've all been the sabotager before. We've all been the person that's chosen sabotage. But in this moment, sabotage is coming because people say they want transformation in Jerusalem, but also they're getting a little too comfortable with the status quo. Because at this moment, there are Roman soldiers walking through Jerusalem, governing, policing the upcoming Passover. And nobody is happy about this. The city of Jerusalem is occupied territory, and everyone is mad about this. And the general consensus in Israel is that Rome is a problem, that the Messiah is coming, and that God is faithful to them. That's the general consensus of the moment in time that they're in. That Rome is a problem, that the Messiah is coming, and that God is faithful to them. And you might think that everyone, literally everyone who believes this could rally around these things and hope for transformation and for something to be different. But if you've ever met people before, everyone can agree on the same thing and then radically disagree on how to address the problem. So everyone agrees that Rome is a problem, Messiah is coming, and that God is faithful. But the irony of this text is that while the Messiah is right in front of them, he asks for more change than Rome does. And so the sabotage is coming. Now, you might think as well, in our world today, that everyone is on the same page with the world we live in as well. That there are problems in our world. That God is going to save us. That his help is coming. But you begin to wonder whether or not we line up with the Pharisees as well. We might like the status quo just a little too much to let God fully do his work in our life, in our world. But the problem in this text is that the very people that the Pharisees want reformed and transformed are the people that are most interested in Jesus. The Pharisees are self-righteous. They believe they've got it right. And while they watch all of Jerusalem lighting up with excitement for Jesus, That's not the transformation that they thought they ordered. And so they're getting mad. They're getting angry that Jesus' popularity is increasing. We're shown here that the outsiders, people from faraway places, are coming to Jesus. That people are lining the streets to welcome him into their city. They're excited about them. And a week ago, the Pharisees would have done anything for them to be excited about what God is doing in their world. But now, they're angry because they're saying, yeah, we want God to act, but not that way. And so the Pharisees are not interested in how Jesus wants to transform. So they become sabotagers. I worry about how many of us, I worry about myself, that we're more like the Pharisees than Jesus or even the Greeks who want to see Jesus today. There are consensuses in our churches as well today that the old models are not working like they used to, that society needs Jesus, and that God is faithful to the church. I can't find a single church that doesn't believe this. And yet, we live in a crisis moment within the church in the Western world because very few of us are willing to let go of our way, our rights, our vision, our traditions, our preferences for how God would move and how God would save. I wonder if in this moment in the church, the biggest struggle that we have is a really, really ancient problem. You see, there's a heresy that has existed since the first century among Christians. It's been called a heresy around every single corner, and yet it still lives pervasively among God's people. It's called Gnosticism. Have you ever heard this before? I bet what you have heard of is agnosticism. This is like the opposite of that. Agnostics believe that something is happening, but they're not really sure what. Gnosticism is more of a dead certainty, a special knowledge that insiders have. And there are some forms of this special knowledge that Gnostics have had for 2,000 years that is really, really clinging to the Christian people in our world today. There are really three things that make something Gnostic. First of all is that I'm a God. My perspective, my view, my happiness, my joy is central to the way that the world works. You might say, all hail me. I am the king. The second thing is that we live in an inferior world, and there must be an inferior God that runs this place. And then finally, that we are able to just flee this disaster. We want to get out of here. And so ultimately, the three tenets of Gnosticism are, I'm the ultimate authority, the world is a disaster, and I need an escape from this place. Well, this is not the Christian faith at all, because in the Christian faith, we believe that God is the ultimate authority, not me. We believe that the world is good, that God created a good and ordered world, and that sin is the problem and created the chaos in this world. And third, we believe in the renewal of all things. God is a God of resurrection. And so lives, people, earth, creation can all be made new by God. And so you may think, okay, yeah, I'm on the Christian side, but let's just take a moment to examine ourselves if we could. How can you see Gnosticism in your own life? Well, one way is just individualism. We might flee from God's moral order because I know what's good for me better than God would know what's good for me. That's one way we can know that we're Gnostic. That's everywhere. There's fatalism. The world is going to hell. This place is a disaster. Everything we see is bad. And we just need to grin and bear it and get out of here. And then escapism is the final thing, is that we want to get out of here. We barely even like living here. That we can't wait for heaven so much that we never really enjoy God's creation here in the life that we're given. I came across a movie from the 90s as I was reading a book this week. I've not actually seen this movie, but I thought it was such a good metaphor for this idea of Gnosticism in our own life, that I wanted to tell you about how I understand this movie. Because it goes to show just the absurd ends to the things that we think we long for. We want so badly to be individualistic, that I matter. My way is what's best. I have a real vision for my life. It has a great way of just undermining all of the values of the season of life, the world that we live in right now. The movie is called Safe, and it stars Julianne Moore. And the story goes basically like this. Her name is Carol, and she has it all. She is wealthy. She's a stay-at-home mom. She has a wonderful marriage. She has a child. She is surrounded by friends. She shops all day. She goes to the gym. She has time and money to go to the salon. She is living the good life in the world that we live in right now. However, one day while she's driving in her car, she has an allergic reaction that triggers a panic attack. And so she begins to feel like the world is attacking her. And so she begins to go and see doctors to find out what is wrong with her. And all of the doctors and all of the psychiatrists that she sees all tell her that she's absolutely fine, that it was an isolated incident. But she's so bothered by this incident that she just keeps looking for someone to tell her that there is actually something wrong with her. And eventually she ends up going to a seminar about toxins. And she determines that's it. The toxins are attacking me. And so she starts reordering her entire life so that she never brings toxins in the food in her house. All the air that she breathes is perfectly filtered. She does everything she can to avoid toxins because that must be what's attacking her. But she finds in the modern world she cannot escape toxins. So she finds her way to a commune that promises that it will make her safe. It'll bring her into a life completely free of toxins. And so she starts living there until one day she's out on a walk and realizes that the commune that she's in is right next to a freeway. And she freaks out and she runs to the owner and demands that she be taken further away from the freeway. And she says, all the way on the inside of your commune, there's an igloo that's completely sealed off. Can I move in there? And they say, well, no, that's ridiculous. And she goes, no, I want to be in there so I can be free of toxins. And so eventually they make an arrangement for the big money. She can move into the igloo and be sealed in there. And the final scene of the movie is her breathlessly hugging her child and her husband and saying goodbye to them as she's moved into this igloo and sealed off from the entire world. And the final scene of the movie is her looking into a mirror, repeating to herself, I love you. I love you. I love you. She had a perfect life, but it was communal. It was connected. It was with other people. And she became scared of what the world had to offer. And so she just kept descending into herself, until she came to realize all that she truly loved, all that she would really sacrifice for, was herself. This is the end of the modern gospel of the world that we live in, of self-righteousness, of self-fulfillment, of making myself number one, of seeing that I'm the king and I am God. This is the logical end of that sort of religious life. And this religion of escape, this religion of individuality is pervasive. And we all buy it in step one or step two because we are consumeristic people. But the logical end of it is loneliness. The logical end of it is cut off from the world. The logical end of it is no joy at all. And so I think it's good for us to remember what the gospel of Scripture is, because it's so radically different than the gospel of the culture that we live in. The gospel of Scripture is that Jesus saw the pain, the brokenness of this world. We had been given a good world, and we had chosen sin to the point that our lives, our world, our relationship, our cities, our families are breaking under the weight of sin. And Jesus saw this, and he gave his life for us. Like a seed that had to die, it was buried in the ground, and it raised new life that multiplied. He exalted himself up on the cross that we might be wooed to see that love for us. Jesus doesn't just take what is owed him as the Son of God. He lays down his life that we might find also that if we are willing to die to the narratives and the gospels and the fake gods of this world, we might find life in this world that carries on into the ever after as well. That's a true gospel. It's a gospel that transforms. It's a gospel that makes new our lives, our families, our communities, and our world. It's a gospel that's worth following. It's a God that's worth following. When you leave here today, you'll have no end of false idols, false gods, false good news that'll be presented to you on your phone, on your television, on the internet, on your computer. There's no end to the amount of good lives that you'll be shown. And what's scary is very few of them will invite you to die. But the actual good news of Jesus is that if we are to die to ourselves, if we're to say, I am not the end of the story, I am not the center of this universe, I am not king of the kingdom, Jesus is. If we're willing to die to the gospels, the good news is that we're sold in the media and in our world, we'll find a life that's more abundant than any other shortcut that we're given. And this life will carry us through with joy in this world and into eternal life in the world to come as well. And so today, as we close, I want to remind you, say no to the false gospels that you're given. Say yes to following Jesus. As we sing this final song today, if you've not followed Jesus, we want to be a part of helping you learn to become a disciple that follows Jesus with your life. The altars are open if you'd like to pray, but there are pastors here as well that would love to befriend you and to talk with you about step 1, step 2, step 3 of learning to follow Jesus and finding life abundant in him. Would you stand with me as we sing this final song?